Hey you guys, and welcome back to That Disney Girl. So today we are going to be talking about the fictionalized backstory over at Wilderness Lodge, which is one of Disney's most amazing deluxe resorts that you can explore. Okay, so Wilderness Lodge is one of the most fun resorts that you can check out at Walt Disney World. They have everything, literally everything, from a scavenger hunt of hidden Mickeys that you can pick up at the front desk to literally having a piece of the train that Walt Disney had in his backyard, the one that he originally made, over in California in the actual hotel. But today, we're going to be talking about something that people don't talk about too often, which is the Silver Creek Star. Now, the Silver Creek Star was a newspaper created by Imagineers, and it was given to you when you checked into the Wilderness Lodge, and on that newspaper, it was basically a way to have the hotel tell their guests what they were going to be doing for the day, like pool hours, different things that they just wanted to convey. But also, on this newspaper, they were able to tell you the backstory of the hotel, which Imagineers created with fictionalized characters, making sure that everything that they were saying in there made sense to the whole hotel as a whole, dropping little Easter eggs, I think, in there to kind of just, I guess, make everything seem more real and make it seem like it was rooted in a place in Disney history. Okay, so if you're a Disney fan, you know that the Wilderness Lodge was made in 1994, but if we're taking a look at the newspaper, it was more like the 1800s. So in the end, basically what I've done is checked out all of these newspapers. There's not too much information on these newspapers online, but there are a few blogs that help me fill in the gaps, so I will link all of my research down below, but let's take a look at the whole story about this place. Okay, so one of our main characters is going to be Colonel Ezekiel Moreland. Now, if you are someone who looks at fictionalized Disney characters, you know that almost every name has a meaning. They don't just give someone a name and it doesn't mean anything. So I wanted to take a look at this name, see if it has any relevance. And if you notice that one of the names that I say does have some sort of relevance to maybe a past Disney Imagineer or someone, just something to do with Disney, definitely let me know those in the comments below. It's my favorite thing to figure out, and I don't think I got them for everyone in the story. It's mostly just Ezekiel that I took a look at, so let me know, but let's take a look at his name. Okay, so right off the bat, his last name is Moreland. He's the person who's going to discover the land that we're going to talk about today, so I thought that that was just instantly something. A lot of Disney characters' last names usually pertain to something about something that they're going to do, maybe a way that they're going to die if you're looking at Phantom Manor, but it usually has something to pertain with their character's story, so the fact that he discovered Moreland and his last name was Moreland, I thought that that was maybe something interesting. And then I found two other tidbits of information. Inside one of the Disney games, there is a character named Ezekiel, and he actually signs up to be a caretaker of the Haunted Mansion. So I thought that there may be a correlation in there. But that Ezekiel's last name is Holloway, and this one is Moreland. So I don't know, maybe that they could be somewhat related in the idea of passing down a name through a lineage, and that's why they both have the name Ezekiel. I'm not sure, but I did take a further look, and there is actually someone named Ezekiel Disney born in 1755. So he may or may not have any relevance to the Walt Disney family. I'm not 100% sure, but I just thought that that was interesting that you did have someone named Ezekiel Disney, and then this guy's name is Ezekiel. So that's cool. Let's move on. Okay, so Moreland is a retired war veteran of the War of 1812, and he was really inspired by the expeditions and writings of Clark and Page. And if you didn't know, Clark and Page are real people in U.S. history. These are going to be some of the first people to have expeditions across the western side of the United States, which is what makes perfect sense in this whole context of the story, because that's exactly what Moreland is about to do. Okay, so it is 1823. Colonel Ezekiel Moreland wants to go out west and start looking out over there. So he gets a group of men and they start heading down the Missouri River, and not even, I think it's 80 kilometers down, are they struck with some major tragedy. There are over 10,000 buffaloes that come at them, and basically everyone is decimated except for Moreland, but he decides to travel onward solo, all by himself, which is totally crazy considering the journey that he's about to endure. And when I was taking a look at this aspect of the story, I noticed that if you're going to go into the Wilderness Lodge and look at those beautiful chandeliers that are all up top, it's going to be made of, I believe, like a teepee sort of fabric, and then on there is going to be a buffalo, and you're also going to get a cowboy looking kind of character on a horse. And if you're looking at it from like the right way, it looks like the buffalo is chasing that cowboy character. So to me it was interesting. I don't know if it's intentional, but it's kind of telling the story about the first part of this story, at least, of how the buffalo, and we're going to continuously get this idea that nature and Mother Nature is kind of dictating what needs to happen when it comes to the Wilderness Lodge. So in this case, we're kind of seeing that who's controlling who? Is it the person to the animal, or is it the animal to the human? So I just thought that was interesting. Not sure if that design has anything to do with this backstory, but even if it doesn't, it kind of does now because it fits perfectly. Okay, so after all of this happened, Moreland decides to write to his daughter Genevieve, aka Jenny, and she is an art curator. She is very popular in this story, and we definitely know that things that are going to be based in Disney Imagineering when it comes to like the father-daughter relationship, that's very prominent. If we're going to take a look at the Jungle Cruise, you're going to have Albert and you're going to have his daughter Alberta, who kind of takes over, which is something similar that we're going to see here. So just an interesting trend when it comes to Imagineering. You knew that Walt loved his daughters. I'm not sure if that's kind of the reason that a lot of these stories kind of take this trend. Even in Phantom Manor, you have an overprotective father to his daughter. Just something interesting to note. But let's take a look at what Moreland wrote to Genevieve after this whole tragedy ensued. I take to the wilderness alone. The good earth will provide me everything I need to survive. I have my gun, I have my courage, and I have my determination. What need I of anything else, especially of cowardly scoundrels who turn ashen in the face of the smallest adversity? So in this, he's basically saying he's going to continue on. He believes in the land, like I mentioned earlier. That's going to be something in the story that you need to pay attention to. And in this, we can clearly see that some of the men that he was with, they survived this and they decided to turn back out of fear. But that is not Moreland's character, so he's going to continue and persevere. So a few years pass before Jenny hears of anything from her father, and then all of a sudden 2 years later, she gets to see him in the flesh, which is like, what? How did that even happen? So let's like reverse a little bit and find out how, because a lot of things went down in the past 2 years. And before we dig back into those 2 years, we're also going to take a look at Jenny's companion, who plays a really important role in this entire backstory. So Moreland basically comes home, tells Jenny about this beautiful, amazing land. They know that they need to go back, and Jenny's going to bring her traveling companion, who is a fellow artist. She's an art curator. You're going to see a trend going on over there, and his name is Frederick Alonzo Gustave. So if you know about the relevance of this name, you gotta comment that down below. But he's gonna be a painter, and he's also gonna be responsible for a lot of the artwork that we end up seeing at the Wilderness Lodge. So they go back to this area, which they name Silver Creek, and they're gonna name this because of the way that the minerals shine in the water. It looks nice and sparkly, just like Silverwood, and that's basically where the name for this newspaper comes from, the Silver Creek Star. We're gonna take a look at another excerpt from there and see what it said. And like I said before, we talk about what happened in those 2 years. The way that Moreland was able to get back was that he was basically able to participate in the fur trade over around Silver Creek. There were lots of beaver pelts that he was able to get. He sold lots of them after hunting them, and he was able to collect a lot of money. And he was going to use this money to be able to travel himself back to his daughter and to travel them all back out to the area of Silver Creek. So, like I said, let's take a look at what that newspaper said. Using the small fortune her father had raised from the fur trade, they brought out a crew of men from St. Louis and had built a small lodge near the freshwater spring. Jenny would remain in Silver Creek Springs for the remainder of her life. She established a preservation area in her father's honor where she could enjoy the natural beauty of the wilderness. The Wilderness Lodge welcomed artists, scientists, and nature lovers of all kinds over the years. As the number of visitors grew, the lodge expanded to accommodate them. Eventually, they added rooms that grew around the spring, making it all part of the Wilderness Lodge. And if you have ever visited the Wilderness Lodge, you know that there is this Silver Springs Creek that runs throughout it. It actually starts in the lobby. There's like a bridge that you can look over and under it when you're around there, and it's gonna go out into the back. It's gonna go through to the pool. It ends up going to a geyser, which we're gonna talk about, and then ends up in Bay Lake. There's lots of actually interesting filtration systems in here since it's running through so many different kinds of areas. So basically before it's going to enter the pool, there's gonna be one filtration system. Before it goes out into Bay Lake, there's another one, just making sure that all that water's clean. You'd never have any idea that these systems are there or that it's different water being processed, but I just thought that was something that's interesting. But let's get back to the story. So that geyser I was talking about, you're gonna notice it. It looks just like this. It is called Fire Rock Geyser, and it just spits out some really warm water and warms up the area, but it does have a really important kind of tie to this entire story, and we're gonna talk about that right now. So let's go back to those 2 years where Moreland was discovering this land. So it ended up becoming very cold, and Moreland set up camp by this geyser. And when he was there, he met a native tribe that was also traveling. And while they were there, they told him about this old tale about the Fire Rock Geyser. So basically what happened many years ago was that there were hunters that were coming around this land, and they wanted to become warm, so they started cutting down parts of trees and starting fires around this whole area just to kind of stay warm, cook their food, and survive. But legend has it that the geyser did not like this. The geyser didn't like fire being set to the land, didn't like the wood being used for fire here. He wanted it to be a, I guess like a preserved area. So the geyser erupted, taking out the fire, getting rid of the teepee that these hunters were using. And what this group of natives eventually thought was that this was the way that the land was saying that fire shouldn't happen around this area, and that the springs would naturally keep the people warm. You didn't have to rely on, I guess, kind of like burning something on these sacred lands. So when Moreland was there and he met up with this tribe, they were able to tell him this story. So he was able to start to learn that this area that he was about to eventually, I guess, kind of like colonize was something that was ruled by Mother Nature. Like I mentioned earlier with the buffaloes, this is definitely something that we're starting to see as a trend when it comes to the Wilderness Lodge. So to me, it makes perfect sense that we have all of these native touches and theming designs in the Wilderness Lodge, because 2 years ago, when Moreland was able to meet this native tribe and talk to their elder running elk and learn about this tale about this Fire Rock Geyser, they were kind of creating a friendship and a bond, and it looks like Moreland really responded well to this tale. He totally understood that fire should not be wasted, and that was the way that this land wanted him to, I guess, kind of go about his days. And since he was so accommodating and understanding about the way that this land needed to be treated, you can definitely see that there was going to be an instant bond created by Moreland and this tribe. So in the end, Moreland wanted to learn more from Elder Running Elk. He wanted to know about their practices and their culture and ways that he could tie it into this land for when he returned. And because he had all of these discussions with him, he was able to get first-hand accounts and experiences from him. And who knows, maybe he came back one day once this lodge was sort of up and running, was able to add some interesting touches and things that Moreland would have obviously definitely appreciated, since they definitely created some sort of symbiosis and friendship while they were both at this rock geyser trying to stay warm from the cold. Okay, so now we know about this rock geyser, we know how the resort sort of came to be, but we also know that there's a very strong key role of art here. We know that from the newspaper's description, artists were very welcomed here. We know that Genevieve was a art curator, and her traveling companion, Frederick, he was an artist. So let's look at Frederick and how he kind of inspired the different artwork inside of the Wilderness Lodge. Okay, so Frederick is gonna get there and he sees this beautiful land and he can't help himself. The first thing he needs to do is create some art. So right away he goes off to this ledge, which is just by the geyser, and Moreland ends up seeing that he's doing this, and right away he tries to warn him about the geyser and the land, and this is what he says. "My friend, this valley is alive. You may be well advised to choose a less precarious location for your work." So Frederick heard him, didn't listen, started painting, and the geyser erupted. So basically, Frederick went flying, his painting supplies went right over that ledge, and everything was ruined. But This wasn't the Geyser's way of kind of telling him that he could never paint again. I think this was the Geyser just introducing itself to Frederick and saying, if you're gonna paint me, if you're gonna kind of use my land for your inspiration, you just need to respect it. So Frederick ended up using this area to paint all of the time, but he also made sure to pack up before that Geyser was going to erupt. So he made sure that if he was gonna use the land, he didn't use it for too long. He was kind of just respecting its boundaries, and they ended up having a really great relationship, because lots of the paintings that he did ended up over in Artist Point. So when Jenny was making the Wilderness Lodge, expanding it, making it bigger, it needed to have a formal dining room, and she remembered there was a certain area overlooking a beautiful sort of cliff right by the Geyser that Frederick loved to paint at. So she decided that this was going to be where she was going to set up the formal dining room, so that everyone who was eating was going to be able to have the same view that Frederick had every day while he was painting. And she was going to name this place Artist Point. You're going to be at a certain point of the resort, and it was meant for artists. It was just a way for her to pay homage to Frederick. And if you're gonna look right away when you enter, there's going to be giant murals everywhere. And according to this backstory, these are all going to be the work of Frederick and of the land that is around you when you're at the Wilderness Lodge. And just a really interesting part of theming and Imagineering, some ways that the Wilderness Lodge still holds this story to be true today is that when you're visiting Artist Point, you may get a menu and they're going to say that this private dining menu is courtesy of Miss Jenny, just kind of saying that she curated it specifically for you. So it kind of just shows this idea that she's still in the picture. And if we have a formal dining room, Jenny needed to get a cook. And in every story you need a villain, and that is when this character comes in. So Georgie McGregor saw this land and saw this lodge being built, and he wanted to use the land to get all of those minerals that it ended up having within it, to be able to collect all of those minerals and all of that gold, and to be able to sell it. And he was just basically this prospector who was only in it for greed. But he knew from different stories that this is not something that the Morelands were gonna let fly, so he ends up coming to the Wilderness Lodge in Silver Creek as a chef, applying to work at this new restaurant, Artist Point. Jenny offers Georgie a room, but he's basically like, no, I don't want to get in your way. I'm just going to set up my own little camp right on over there by the Geyser, by the springs, right by all of the area that the minerals are located, so he can basically be stealing everything at night and when he's not working, which is what he was doing. He was kind of just taking from the land and lying to the Morelands. And so Jenny is really not that dumb. She ended up noticing that some nights he was taking 2 pots back to his tent for no sort of reason, and she ended up seeing what he was doing to the land. So right away, Jenny hired a new cook, and she was about to give Georgie the boot when the Geyser erupted. Obviously, we knew this was something that was going to be coming. The Geyser was obviously pissed. It knocked Georgie up 20 feet in the air onto one of the many beautiful trees on the Wilderness Lodge, and he ended up being stuck there, and everything that he had collected and all of his belongings were just gone into the lake, over the cliff, just all gone, and he could never find it again. So that was just the Geyser once again reminding everybody that you gotta kind of pay attention to your land, you have to respect the land you have, and you can't exploit it. So that's the story about the Wilderness Lodge. I think it is so interesting, and if any of these names mean something to you, or if there are any more details that you know about, any more characters that were in this entire story, you gotta comment them down below. We can keep expanding. The more that we find out, the better the story is gonna become. So like I said, if you have more information, you gotta comment that down below. If you enjoyed learning about the Wilderness Lodge backstory, you gotta give this video a nice big thumbs up. And if you like hearing about backstories, fictionalized characters, Disney history, or just anything Disney, I mean, we talk about all of that stuff on this channel, you gotta make sure to subscribe, hit that notifications bell if you wanna make sure that you're up to date on all of the videos that we're gonna be putting out here at the Disney Girl. And aside from that, I'll see you real soon. Okay, bye everyone.